Welcome back, Filmpreneurs, to episode 6. Wow, that's a lot of content so far. So episode 6 of Filmpreneur, the podcast and the course that is inspiring and empowering filmmakers like you to make massive positive social change in the world through your art and craft of filmmaking. And how do we do that? We do that by building sustainable and profitable businesses out of our gifts of film storytelling. So to date, in my storyline, coming from all the way back in film school to living in the Caribbean on sailboats and on cruise ships and honing my skills, creating documentaries about music film festivals, making a name for myself, incorporating my first company, incorporating my second company with partners, all the trials and tribulations of partnerships, all the trials and tribulations of building a company without having any clue how to build a company and not having the right resources around, but also really celebrating all of the incredible learnings that have come out of both failures and wins. And acknowledging that every single thing that we do in our business careers and in our filmpreneur journey is critical for future impacts. It's kind of hard to explain that, but because hindsight is 2020, and telling this story of how I was able to build Hemmings House is my opportunity to look at my 2020 milestones. During that ladder of growth, how did I fall? How did I get back up? How did I climb? All of these sort of things. And the fun thing for me is, we're just getting going as a company. Hemmings House just recently turned 11. We've been doing this for 11 years. But before Hemmings House, of course, we had Hit Media. Before that, I had Independent Medium Productions. So sure, I'm probably going into my 20th year doing this. And I'm sure that there's at least another 20 years ahead of a whole bunch of great new learnings where I'm going to look back at this particular recording and I'm probably going to smile gently and laugh a little bit at myself about how young and naive I was. Anyhow, young and naive, that's kind of a funny thing. I wouldn't mind being that right now, actually. Just turned 40. So where we're at right now is we shut down Hit Media. I had a couple bruises, had to, do this a little bit, shake the dirt off. And Tidby and I immediately had the opportunity to create a TV show, our very first TV series. That is one that's coming from our brains. Now, I have to be careful saying our, because this is really an idea that came from Tidby, from Andrew Tidby's brilliant creative mind. I came along for the ride on this one and learned a heck of a lot. So this is what Tidby pitched to CTV. So CTV is one of our national broadcasters here in Canada, who also is in the Discovery and travel family. So he pitched an idea of going around the world, filming the world's most expensive luxury items. Okay, so it sounds kind of silly, doesn't it? But for me, as someone who is so passionate about learning about cool things, like cool useless things too, but like how things are made, I love that sort of. I love the story behind products, and it was just shocking to us to being kind of new to the scene, never produced a TV show before ourselves, to be given a significant license. I can't remember now what the license was on it, but it might have been like 1.2 million or something. I can't remember now. It was quite a few years ago. Today, that's a decent budget for Canadian television. Just as an aside, if you're doing, reality show, factual TV, and you're in the $100,000 to $150,000 a half-hour episode range, that's kind of average. But for our very first show, to get a decent budget like that was amazing. The thing is, and rightfully so, we don't know how to produce TV, and CTV knew that, because who are we? We've got years of experience doing little music videos and documentaries and corporates, but working in the TV industry is a completely different beast. And we're going to go through that a little bit later on. It is such a different business model that they said, we'll give you the license fee for this show called Planet Luxury, but you have to partner with another company to kind of mentor you and make sure, that you get this thing delivered right. And they suggested, actually, who are our friends in the province of New Brunswick, Dream Street Pictures, Tim and Rick, who are very experienced television producers. So they partnered with us. So it was Tidby Pictures and Dream Street. And we're able to create a production that went into 2 seasons, and it certainly created a platform for a ton of fun for us. For me, I got to travel all over the world for this series, filming the world's most expensive cars, the most expensive boats, the most expensive watches. And my favorite, the world's most expensive scotch. Let me tell you really quickly about that episode. And actually, before we do that, let me tell you about the format of the show. So the format is, at the intro, Act 1 is we talk about the product really quick. So, for example, the scotch. And the particular scotch was called the Macallan 60. And when you see 60 on whiskey, that means it's sat in a barrel for 60 years aging. You don't see that. A lot of times you see 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 15-year-olds. It's very rare to see anything much older than a 15 or 20-year-old. And they get very, very expensive. But this was a 60-year-old that the Macallan, I don't know if they lost the barrel and found it many years later, but it is a precious bottle of gold. And essentially, it went to auction for $72,000. So think about that for one bottle of whiskey. So for the format of the show, what we would do is we say, okay, this thing costs like $750,000, you know. Why does it cost so much? So the first act, we always go to the factory where the thing was made. We talk to the creators. So in that episode, we went out to Scotland. We filmed at the Macallan distillery, and we learned about why the Macallan has such a legendary status in the whiskey world. And they're right beside the Spey River, which is some of the cleanest, finest whiskey-making water that there is in all of Scotland. Now, I'm sure a lot of Scots would argue that fact, but it's part of the Macallan legend that it's that water from the Spey River that is the magic behind so many Speyside whiskeys that the world loves so much. So we went and figured out why Macallan's so expensive, learned the story about the $72,000 bottle of 60-year-old Macallan. And then a commercial break would happen. And then the second act, we would go find the insane person who owns one of the products. So in this case, we went to Bologna, Italy, and met this guy named Giuseppe. And, you know, Giuseppe, great guy, but he had that perfect stereotypical movie Sicilian mobster look to him. And even though we're in northern Italy, he just had that, you know, he was a really, really cool guy. Anyway, he takes us, we're in a rental car, me and my friend Alistair, who's my director of photography, takes us into this industrial park, nondescript, and there's this garage door, opens it up. Behind the garage door sits a Ferrari, a limited edition Ferrari Super America, crazy expensive car. Behind the Ferrari, there's Costco-sized shelves of fine and rare whiskeys. He had 50,000 bottles of fine and rare whiskey on shelves behind his Ferrari. Like, imagine going to Costco and it's just lined with bottles of scotch. Giuseppe trades whiskey. There's a market. There's a global marketplace for people who trade whiskey. And it goes to auction. People make a ton of money for fine and rare scotch. And this little room beside was his personal collection where he had two of everything. Two of every one of his fine and rare scotches. One that he could drink and enjoy with friends like us, and the other to keep or to sell for a lot of money. At the very center of the room was two bottles of this Macallan 60. Crazy. So I just have to tell you the story just because it's funny and it sets the picture. After we're done filming that act 2 of a typical half hour, he's like, I'm not even going to try to do an Italian accent. I can't do it. But he said, I'm going to take you to a restaurant. So we follow him in his Ferrari. We're in our little dinky rental car. And we go to this restaurant in the back of this old lady's house on a hill. It's all outdoors. And she comes out with a plate of truffles like this big. And I don't know if you know about truffles, but they're those little mushroomy things that only dogs can smell out. Or pigs can smell out, I should say. And they're crazy expensive. And I asked Giuseppe, just out of curiosity, I was like, what would a plate like this cost? And he's like, oh, maybe like the equivalent of $600 I was like, oh, okay, wow. And the whole thing was on him. It was a treat on him. It was so nice of him. Then he pulls out a bottle. It wasn't the 60-year-old, but he pulls out a bottle, cracks it open, and pours it. And as a joke, I wanted to ask him if he had any Diet Coke to go with it. And then I said that, but I got a kick under the table from my friend Alistair. As it turned out, what he opened was a bottle from a collection. He had a little case. It was worth about $24,000, a case of whiskey. So I don't know what that is per bottle, but say 24 divided by 8. So it's a good chunk of change in that bottle. Cracks it open. We're just drinking whiskey freely. And I asked him, why us? Why are we the ones honored that he cracked that bottle open for him? And he told us because he owns the whole collection, the whole case, of this particular whiskey. It is a limited supply. And the story of that particular whiskey was Macallan gave it to Charles and Diana for their wedding, and it's a blend of both their birth years. So at some point in history, that case of whiskey went to the auctions, and he ended up getting it for $24,000 or whatnot. And what he said was so fun. He's like, I can crack this thing open, and it means we have one less of those bottles left in the world, which means his whole collection of that particular variety went up. He made money by drinking scotch. By sharing that scotch with us, his collection became more expensive. This is the TV show we were making. So the next commercial break would happen, and we'd go find another product. So in every episode, we'd have 2 products, which means we'd go to 2 factories and find 2 types of people. So we did this all over the world, literally, and it blew my mind. It was amazing. But for me, the learning that I had on how to create a TV budget, how E&O insurance works, how the different roles of production managers, production coordinators, producers, executive producers, how to deal with broadcasters, how to deal with notes, online, offline editing, and color correction, grading, sound mixing, delivering for HD. All these different things are so far out of the scope of my video business before. Like, we really took it to our knowledge base to the next level by being able to take this TV show. And I have to say, at the beginning, to be forced, quote unquote, to partner with a more experienced production company, it was a bit of a blow to our ego. So we can do this ourselves, but we couldn't have. There's no way would have been able to pull that off that first time by ourselves. So I'm very grateful to those partners that came in and helped make that work. Because for me, my benefit was that was me going to producer school. I've already been to film school. I've already been to business school. This is now executive producer school. I learned so much about making TV on that show. And again, putting the pride on the back table and just realizing that we are lifelong learners. Every different stage as we grow our businesses, we're going to feel like we're going to feel entitled that we deserve more or we could do it ourselves. But don't fall into that trap. Take as much mentorship, coaching, and partnering with the right partners as much as you can to produce the best product and tell the best story that you possibly can. So after Planet Luxury was completed, Andrew continued with Dream Street to do a second season. I decided to go somewhere else, and I'll tell you where that is in a second. It involves wrestling, which is really cool. But it's also neat to know that we did all the editing in the basement of my house, okay? So I had all these filmmakers, all these editors living at my house. We worked around the clock getting these episodes out to the network. And so we had this kind of like this frat house in a way of guys who just work so hard during the week. And again, through these epic parties in the weekends, like totally epic. We have DJs, live bands, all this sort of thing. But we just had this cadence. We had that young energy to do this. We're delivering high-level TV, working our butts off, but really, enjoying ourselves on the weekend. And that's relevant for the story here in a second. So when Tippy ended up going to continue with Planet Luxury Season 2, I was out skiing in Kicking Horse, BC, and snowboarding with a friend. And I got a phone call from the New Brunswick Film Office saying, listen, a bunch of these really big wrestlers just came into my office almost demanding to get funding for a TV show. And that's not how a film office works. But the guy called me and was like, hey, Greg, they sound like they've got an interesting story. I can't seem to get rid of them. I'd support you in producing your very first TV show by giving you some equity and tax credits if you want to take this project on. I was like, ooh, yes. Always say yes. When a door opens, I'm always saying yes. So within not a lot of time, I'm literally in the gondola heading up the Kicking Horse to the top of the mountain and snowboarding down. But every time I go up, I'd be on the telephone with the broadcaster, the Fight Network at the time, negotiating the deal to close my very first TV show. And it was called Wrestling Reality. And we ended up shooting this thing. It was amazing. We followed these wrestlers, a lot of them ex-WWE or WWF back in those days, and just really got underneath the gritty, dark underground underbelly of the wrestling circuit. The wrestling circuit that's happening right now, not the WWE flashy stuff. But these are real wrestlers putting in the real time and real passion. And I'm not a wrestling fan at all. I never have been. But the stories that we got out of these people, because they're all such engaging, interesting human beings, to decide to be a wrestler in the first place means you got to be an interesting person. But it really solidified the fact that I'm doing what I want to do. I am capturing the passions of other people, because I'm not passionate about wrestling, but I'm passionate about other people's stories, right? So after filming Wrestling Reality, I was like, this is it for me. I want to keep doing these documentary series. These are amazing. And it's really funny that it's wrestling, because I don't really care about wrestling at all, but these people, they have stories that need to be shared. So on that particular one, we're still living at home in my house, in the basement, a bunch of people living there. And really, it was a guy's frat house. And I say that in the fact that you can just picture what it was like. We did our best to keep the place tidy. Anyway, so the business was the bottom floor, and we kind of lived on the top floor. But it's neat because I got a phone call during the same time. Actually, it was an email from a producer out of Italy, out of Torino, wanting to improve her English. And she wanted to come live with a television producer, because she has a production company in Italy. So wanted to come and do a work stay and volunteer for free, but learn English for 3 months. And again, saying yes as much as I can. I said, yes, of course. Apparently, I was the only producer that responded to her. So Federica moves to Canada, moves into this guy's frat house, has no idea what's going on, because we're not like the business community back in her hometown. But she was a very good sport. I ended up falling in love with Italian espresso and pasta. She was an amazing addition to the team. And I remember we threw this one epic party. We had this one party where a cabbie said to a person from uptown saying, yeah, I'm heading out to this place called Accomack Backland Road. And the cabbie said to the person coming out, this is after the bars were out, like, oh, you're heading up to Hemming's house. And the person was like, yeah, how'd you know? And the cabbie was like, every cab driver knows where Hemming's house is, because every weekend there's these epic parties. So it wasn't about going to the Accomack Backland Road, it was about going up to Hemming's house. And I didn't have a business yet, or a business name, but I just did this wrestling show. And I remember so clearly talking to Federica, saying, before this goes to broadcast, it's got to be produced by something. So she helped me. We made a little logo, and I was like, well, house music kind of reminds me of the setting that we have, where we're really creative. We have all these parties, and it is my house. So I was like, what about Hemming's house? And so it was. So Hemming's house was born out of a cabbie, or a number of cabbies, knowing where to go late night on a Saturday night after the bars let out, because we were definitely the place to go to. Anyhow, that relationship led to some really cool things with Federica, because the two of us ended up producing a documentary for Rai. And Rai is like the CBC for Italy. It was called Melting Lands. And this was a very cool documentary that we shot up in the Arctic together, because we really wanted to explore not only how the Inuit are adjusting to climate change, but also to political change, social change. There's no other culture in the world, maybe there is, but like, as far as my knowledge, than the Inuit that are experiencing change faster. Because just thinking about, we can experience climate change in our part of the world, but they really experience it, because every year their hunting season gets smaller and smaller, because the ice is getting weaker and weaker. They see it on a regular basis. And permafrost is melting, all that. So we made a documentary called Melting Lands. Down below in the show notes, I'll put a link so you can watch the film if you like. And this was my first international documentary that really helped me find a focus in the fact that, yes, sure, we can make really fun and entertaining and interesting documentaries about wrestlers, but we can use this tool as an education tool, using film as entertainment and as education to open people's eyes about what's happening in different cultures, and how the way we act on a daily basis, maybe down south, is impacting our brothers and sisters living up in the Arctic. Doing that project really solidified the fact that I've got a gift, but a very heavy responsibility to use that gift to promote good in the world. And going way back to the days when I was sailing on the Aventure with Captain Paul, he really solidified in me a value of using business as a force for good. A triple bottom line business is what his boat was. He was good for the planet because he used wind to send goods all over the place. He was good to people because he paid fair rates and was always kind and gentle and respectful to the local population. And he was a profitable business. So way back then, I learned about the triple bottom line, and I learned about kindness in business, you know? So when we fast forward to Melting Lands, I realized, geez, there's a power of promoting kindness in film now that I've experienced. And this is a really pivotal part in the Hemmings House journey. All of these little stories really set up the beginning of a ton of broadcast TV shows that we've done, including more wrestling shows, an MMA series called Cubicle of the Cage, which will blow your mind. This really cool international design show that we have on W Network and Oprah's network called The Real Houses of. Today, even, we are still working on TV series. And I say still because a lot of people think TV is dying. It's not. TV is doing this. We don't exclusively produce for TV. We do a ton of stuff, commercial docs and all that sort of thing. But for TV, we're still producing tons of documentaries and series. And it all started from the basement of my house. So as we wrap up this episode, I want you to think as well about the format and the doors that you're going to walk down. When I say format, I mean, are we blocking ourselves and saying, no, I'm just a documentary maker. No, I'm just a TV series producer. No, I'm just a film director. No, I just do commercial work. Or are we going to try a little bit of everything? And that's kind of what we did. That is what we did. We tried a little bit of everything until we found something that really started to capture our hearts. And in the next episode, I'm going to talk about how I started to grow my team at Hemmings House and how we started to build a culture right from the very beginning that is as strong and stable and positive today as it was at the beginning, when that beginning excitement of startup was happening. And that's going to be in the next episode. So thanks for sticking around with us, Filmpreneurs. I'm really excited to see where you are in your business as you are starting to grow it into an impact film storytelling force.